Hi, and welcome to the Scientist Sage Sangha. I'm Nancy Anderson Dolan from Wise Heart Wellness, and we're so happy to have you with us tonight. Well, maybe today or the morning, wherever you are, but we're happy to have you here with us. And we're talking about rest. And you wouldn't think this was a controversial topic, but maybe a little bit will be. And like, it's not, it's not like rest is just go to sleep or just don't do anything. And that's sort of some of the definitions, like cease doing things. But in the Bible, they talked really highly of rest, and they wanted it on specific times and in specific ways because it was so important to rest. And one of the ideas was it reminded us that we are not God, that we can't control everything, and we shouldn't be running around doing everything all the time. And many faith traditions have that built in. So anything that has been around for thousands of years, I pay a little more attention to myself. But in it, so there isn't just, go lay down. It can be active rest, like walking leisurely, or just that quietly puttering around in a garden, or so many men like to go fishing, like just relaxing into the flow of creating anything. So it's not doing, but it is an orientation that we take into something. And whether that activity is actually laying down or doing something else that we find really restful, not doing it to get it done, but engaging it to be having that restfulness. And so we'll take that idea forward. And the article that was in the email about this Sangha talked about 7 different kinds of rest. I'm not going to go over everything exactly, but just mention some different ideas about it. And the first one that they talk about is creative rest. And when we are creating a lot or being creative, just, solving the dilemmas in your life, working through something in a relationship or at a job, we are using creativity to do that. And we can get burned out. And especially if we have the kind of situation, if you have a 2-year-old, you have to be more creative every minute, every day. And if you have a class of a whole bunch of young children, you really got to turn it up. Or teenagers worse, so just a minute, yeah. But there's lots of times when we have to be really creative, but we need a rest from that. And I encourage people to lean into other people's creativity. It might be reading a good book or looking at artwork, or just taking the break of leaning back and leaning into something else where you are not organizing it. You're not making something new. And because we have an endless supply, but we don't have the endless energy to facilitate that supply. And people think they are blocked in some way, but often they're just tired. They just need to rest and restore. And mental rest, talking about that using up things, I don't know that most people don't know that your brain, as it thinks, uses as many calories as your body when it runs or walks around. And so we have to take a break and restore and let our brain come back into balance and get tanked up. And so mental rest is really important. And we might be able to just stop what we're doing. Maybe we're working on something or sorting through a problem or doing our finances. We might be able to just stop that. But we can't stop our mental activity. So we have to intentionally steer our mental activity when we want to take a rest. And some people do it with trying to veg out with substances or behaviors or media. And that can work a little bit, but our brain is still taking in things, and rarely does it just shut down. Mental rest is more about, like, we might decide to watch a comedy movie, or we might decide to listen to some music. So our mind has something to engage, but not engaging in a difficult or goal-oriented way, so that we can get that actual rest. And just the idea, like meditating is really lovely, but it can be work, mental work for some people. And I really talk if people want to use meditation like that, it can be useful to use a guided meditation so you're not doing the heavy lifting. And so you're just being sort of drawn into that. And one of the other things that works really well is sensory deprivation. And so your mind gets confused about that and it can run off. But if you can bring your mind to the sensory deprivation experience and just have that curiosity flowing. Personally, when I went to one of these, I actually got really sick and someone had to come and rescue me from the float tank because I had so much tension that I hadn't relaxed and rested out of that it all came out at once. So I do put that warning on it that you might have those experiences when you start to rest because maybe you haven't rested enough coming up to it. And then so physical rest, and that one seems to be a little more obvious, but actually relaxing our bodies isn't easy. Like I was just saying about my float tank disaster. But getting enough sleep is like a basic thing, and most of us don't. And sometimes we don't get the right kind of sleep. But if we can physically lay down and rest, we'll talk about some of the global ways to do that and some of the problems with it as we go along. Or we sit back and put our feet up for a little bit, or I have a swing in my backyard that I like to sit on, and that helps my physical rest, that rocking motion. I have my son's girlfriend hangs a hammock that she literally lays in, but it also closes over her like this. And so she gets a little sensory deprivation and she gets a little nature and she gets to lay down and she gets to be away from people. So all of those things contribute to rest. And it depends on the person for sure, not just everything will work for everybody here. Now, one of the most interesting ones that I had never heard about is they talked about social rest. And I thought, what is that? Is that isolation? I've done that a lot in my life, and I do not find that restful either. But it is part of it for some people because it might be time apart from other people, particularly if you're in a job or in a family situation where there's lots of demands on you all the time. But it can be things like meditating in a large group where you're just together, but no requirement to interact. And that can be so restful. Like the heart math practices, when everybody does a certain breathing pattern, that can actually help each other move into this really restful state. And so it isn't necessarily apart from people, but it can be as well. Or being with restful friends where there's no demand, you can sit quietly together, or you can say whatever's on your mind and you don't have to pretend to be a sane person or anything like that. Then emotional rest is one of the ones that I work with a lot with people because we get overwhelmed emotionally. And we might get overwhelmed by the number of situations that are happening. A lot of people post-COVID have found that their emotional stability level is really much lower than it was before. And so they might get emotional hits and they might hear about someone getting harmed or the climate disasters or those things. And those things can really hit us emotionally. We feel them in our bodies. We don't necessarily think about them, but we feel them. And when we are navigating difficult circumstances, caring for a person in our family or working through some things, helping out to carry the load while somebody's sick from work, those things carry emotional load as well. And one of the best things to do to emotionally rest is actually just recognize all the emotional load and put it down in some way, whether that's writing it down or talking to somebody about it or just surrendering. People in 12 steps put things in God boxes, so they let them go. and some way of that recognition of the emotional load, because so often we don't pay attention to it. And then the last, I was going to tell you a little secret, but make sure you don't tell anybody in my family, okay? So when I'm coming home and I sometimes park a block away from my house and just emotionally rest for a minute before I change gears. And it really is about that transitioning. And so emotional rest with that too. Just a moment, we have an emotionally distressed puppy here that is not wanting to rest at all. Okay. So that might be that, like in transitioning, you might find the emotional load difficult, that kind of thing. It's useful to see where it happens for you. It might be at the end of the night and you can't, or before when you go to bed and you might not be able to sleep. And so you might need to plan some way of emotionally resting then. So there's those kinds of things. And then the last one that they talk about in the 7 ways to rest is spiritual rest. And it's interesting, there's a lot of spiritual literature that talks about resting in the divine. And that is another sort of idea, letting the divine take care of things and just living in a surrendered manner. And so again, it is thinking we're not God, thinking we don't run the world and we can't control things there. And so the spiritual rest might be that I'm here for a purpose, so I don't have to prove my worth where I, work or where I live. It might be the idea that, things are unfolding in ways that I might not like or understand, but I don't get a vote. I can sit down and feel for that guidance, and that can feel really restful when we are uncertain about things, when we're trying to make decisions, to really feel for the guidance about what's for us next. That's spiritually restful, as opposed to, I have to figure it out. That really can grab our soul and make us soul tired when we have been pushing and pushing and pushing something that doesn't seem to be moving. So that idea of spiritual rest, again, it has to be tailored for what you believe and what you feel. And even the idea of exploring it can be a useful way to initiate spiritual rest. It's just looking for another way to be on the planet that isn't so overtiring. So those are those ones. And I want to talk about sort of global ways, because you might have noticed some of the different ways of resting could overlap. So one of the things is about the setting or space that you are looking to relax in. And often nature is really useful. That's useful to help your mind calm down. It's useful to help you get physical rest. It can really be soothing emotionally. So nature helps us. We don't have to do, again, all the heavy lifting. It helps us rest without us having to set everything up. And if we do it mindfully, we take it in even more deeply. When people stop to take a look at a sunset, there is this breathing out that happens. And lots of times, we just are busy going somewhere, we're inside trying to clean up the dishes after dinner. We don't take that rest that is naturally happening out in nature. When it gets dark, in the winter, when it's darker longer, all sorts of things like that. In those warm summer days when it invites us outside to sit down, we don't always pay attention to our connections with nature, but having nature as part of the rest plan and protocol for you can be really, really life-changing. When my oldest child was a baby, he would get really wound up all the time. And I would step outside, just on the front step, and he would calm down a little bit, go back inside, and start to cry again. So this was my own personal test case outside. And it really is like that. And the more we pay attention to it, the more we nurture that response in ourselves. The physical actual support and position. There's a lovely meditation guide, and he has tons of meditations on Insight Timer. His name is David G. And he talks about comfort is queen. And he talks about we don't rest if we aren't comfortable. So it's all well and good to do some kinds of meditation that you need to be upright and rigid for and awake. And there are other ways to do it as well, where you get a different restful kind of time. And so really think about what feels good. Are you cold? Are you hot? Is where you're sitting or laying comfortable? Often people are so surprised to find out that, oh, you know what, that pillow under my legs made all the difference in me relaxing. It was so restful. Or that sound in the background that was bothering me, and I shut the window or I put earplugs in, and then I felt more rested. To explore the environment and the physical things about it is really useful to get rest happening. And of course, I say this at least once a Sangha, the intention to rest. And that idea about it, even if I am doing something, I rest really well while I'm doing the dishes, because I sink into it really mindfully and I'm enjoying it. And I stop, before I start, I stop and I think about, oh yeah, I get to do the dishes. And I've got warm water on my hands, and I'm having a lovely, restful time. And it's one of my stop blocks in my night, because I may have rushed home and made dinner, and then there's more to do after that. But at that moment, I get a little rest. And I'm doing something, but it's still really restful for me. So the intention that we take into things can make it a restful event as well. And the preparation to be present for rest. So you might find if you try to rest when you're really hungry, you're not so restful. If you are not having space enough to do it, if people are coming in and out of the room that you're in, that might not work for you. If you can't settle your mind and you don't take some effort to do that, whether that's a meditation or a mantra that you use, or some step to make that work for you. Otherwise, we try and rest, but the effort of resting actually makes us unrested. So just prepping all the things that you possibly can that are useful. And you might just try something really different if the ones that you're doing aren't doing it for you. So I really encourage people to explore, okay? And the mantra that sometimes we feel like we're not done enough in our day. And I really encourage people to think, it's okay, I have done enough. I can rest now. And that might be, 20 minutes after you start, it might be 3.5 hours. In the last little while, I've been navigating having 2 broken legs. And this has been really important for me. I need to know when to rest those legs, because if I overshoot, I have to be sequestered for 2 more days. And I don't find that restful. I'm trying to rest at that point, but I don't want to be resting. So it's really challenging to rest. So being really conscious about what you're doing is really useful, and letting go of some things. So I'm a big fan of making my bed when I get out of it every day. I've probably got had a string of thousands of days. But when I had my broken ankles, I couldn't do that. And so it was a bit of a challenge for me to actually let it go. But realizing that, like, well, that's crazy. I can let this go and I will feel more restful in my day. I don't have to hang on to those things that make me feel like I'm not enough or doing enough. And so that we have a lot of unrealistic, perfectionistic kinds of things in our lives that say we should have done this, we should be like this, we should have finished that. But when we slow down and look for that inner guidance, or how can we work this out? What can we let go of? How can we make this go a little simpler? It really can get us more rest, even in our day-to-day lives, as well as our moment to moment. Just a moment. Yes, we have a persistent participant down here. One moment, please. I'll be right back. Okay, so sorry about that. That's the first time I've had that happen. Hopefully we can edit that part out. We'll see. So back to where we are. The idea about resting early and often. So we are not trying to come back from a way overextended place. And that, like I say, I learned it. You don't want to overwork those physical muscles and your brain. You go to burnout. And that ounce of preventative rest is worth a pound of cure. It is so important to do that. And I just want to take a moment to talk about sleep. Most of the time when we feel really drained, we try to compensate by getting more sleep. And generally that's not the ticket, not enough. And so we need enough sleep. But really this idea of resting early and often, so we don't get to that drained state, because we don't sleep as well as when we're in that state. And so the idea that we must rest as a chemical-free, safe and effective therapy is so important to understand. We're not just sleeping. We can sleep but still feel exhausted. If we're resting when we go to sleep, we get more rest if we are not overdoing it and pushing over hard too much. So now, why is resting a priority in your life? Now I'm going to give you my sales pitch now. I am a marketer, and it's so important about this. Being constantly overtired and overextended creates these cascades of problems. And in the work that I do, this is the list that people come with, and they may have been to different doctors and all sorts of things, but there's too much on the list and there's not a single fix for it. Because when most of us confuse distraction with rest, that's one of the biggest problems. And we use things to feel like we're resting. So we might use food, we might use going out, we might use sleeping, we might use most social media or TV, all sorts of things like that. But if we are overextended and overtired, that doesn't help us. It is that using mode. And then that leads to addiction. And addiction things, when people are tired, the relapse rate doubles. There's just no doubt about it. Most of us cannot perform well. And so simple things like wellness things, like making good food for ourselves, taking care of our environment, all of those things start to fade away if we are not rested. And we're going to talk about how we can do both things at once. And the other thing that comes up when we're chronically under-rested is autoimmune problems. And once autoimmune problems start, they are viciously hard to manage. And it isn't just about, oh, suddenly I'll go and get some more rest and they'll disappear. It doesn't work like that. It takes a long time to take it back. And the thing that happens from autoimmune things, not taking care with feeding of ourselves, whether it's times or foods or things like that, and having too much stress from not being rested, creates poor digestive things. That creates poor brains that think badly. And so when they think badly, we think, I will rest more. but we're not resting at that point. So it becomes this vicious circle, these poor habits. And we get isolated and depressed, and the motivation goes down, and then our attention goes down, and we're less and less able to do it. So I am a big fan, rest early, rest often, and find ways to move through your life in a restful manner. And that lack of enjoyment in life and satisfaction when we're not rested, that's a bigger problem. But now, this isn't just about the time, because then people, well, how do I have time to do all these things? And it is how we perceive and prioritize our rest. And that's the difference in how much rest we get. I know people that will, try and power through a thing, and they're at the end of it and they're like so burned out. But someone else is taking that rest and they are actually more productive. They're more able to think clearly, and they're more able to stick with things, and they take it in the little blocks and they accomplish more. And so this idea of paying attention, it seems really counterintuitive. We're wasting time resting. And actually the history of work was they took in small villages and that they would actually not have so much straight work time. They would rest a lot. And then as it evolved, there became this idea, and often from spiritual places, that it was a waste of time when those people have an afternoon rest. They should be working during that time. And as that happened, we're the sort of unwilling benefactors of those thoughts. And it isn't intuitive to us to rest anymore when we need to. It's clock time. So it's not, if we see it as not a leftover activity, but one of the things we need to do, like drinking water or having dinner, that sort of thing, it can be really useful. The better you are at resting, the better you will be at working. So all of those things are weaved together, and we can't just change it overnight. But one of the things I want you to think about as we close with our meditation, our contemplation, is an inquiry about what steals or supports your peace, ease, and rest. Is it, personal expectations? Is it trying to do more than you can fit in a day? Is it an unrealistic idea of what would fit in a day? Maybe you haven't even thought about what a day that was woven through with rest would look like. And then how can I proceed restfully? And what would it look like to schedule rest in? So sometimes it's going to be a full stop, like my sneaky little park my car around the corner and take a moment. Or maybe it's going to be like the dishwashing thing, this activity. I have a lovely client who really likes to vacuum. She finds it so restful, and it's just soothing to her and happy about it. And that was one of the ways that she does that. And, there's a benefit that cleaning gets done, but she takes that particular thing to be restful with that. So literally, how can you proceed restfully? So let's get comfortable. Take a breath. Feel free to go off screen if you want. So just breathe in deeply. Get comfortable. We talked about comfort being queen. Let's get comfortable. See how your body can rest. And if you disappear off the Zoom window, and I'll think you're laying on the floor or on the bed, not to worry. And notice, is there, you need to shift your shoulders, put your feet up. Some people like to cross their arms over their bodies when they're resting. That feels restful for them. And just bring to mind even a time that you were resting and you felt that deep rest. It might be a place you were in. It might be a place you imagine yourself to be in, an inner garden or sanctuary that you work with. It might be a delicious memory of having a good day and you crawl into bed and it feels great to just let everything go and relax. And notice, is there a temperature at which you feel more relaxed? What comes to mind for you might be sitting in the sun or being wrapped up in a blanket. And for another person, it might be sitting on the porch in a rain where it was lovely and cool. So notice what your body and being need to feel relaxed. And these can be things that you would take into your rest time. And I encourage you now to just imagine going through your day from when you get up. You might feel well rested and take a moment just to enjoy that feeling of being well rested. Or you might not feel that way, but keep an idea of I can rest in this day as it unfolds. I sometimes ask to be shown how can I move through this day restfully. And just imagine the next parts of your day unfolding with an eye to, are there moments where you can take a rest? Some people get up and take a moment in prayer or meditation. Some people like activity at that moment as they get up. They might do a number of things. They might exercise and get organized. And then they take a moment to rest when they get in their car to go to work or when they have got the kids off to school or any kind of transition that they're making. From the getting up, getting organized process to just what's next. And some people that don't have a set schedule might literally take a moment to rest and open up to what is next for them. And pay attention as you go along, those things that might steal your peace. These may be places where you can build in more restful orientations. It might be preparing things the day before. It might be the order of things changing a bit. Might be taking a moment to just rest, even a moment. And just feel that wave of work and rest. And whatever work is in your day. It might be walking the dog, or it might be going to a desk. It might be cleaning house, it might be teaching children. It might be emotional work for yourself. But that rhythm of rest and activity. And as we close, feel free to continue in rest if you're live with me while I close for the people watching later. Thank you so much for joining us to explore resting tonight. It's been very peaceful to talk about this with all of you. And we will be here again next week. We'd love for you to join us. And feel free to send suggestions about things you might like to explore and questions you might have or comments to scientistsage@gmail.com. And this is a by donation program offered for free for those who need it. And thank you so much for all those people that send donations. I really appreciate it. Take good care. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be.